Michael, I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, Doc, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. We were just talking about before we started this conversation about vagus nerve stimulation, and
Right.
there was a population of people where they had I don't remember what operations it was, but group A stayed up, sleep deprived for 36 hours, and group B did the same. But group B was given vagus nerve stimulator, and they were able to retain information even 90 days, complex information after 90 days. And group A could not remember anything. And as you know, like sleep deprivation is like you're drunk or even worse. Like
Oh
there's
yeah.
nothing like that. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, really it is something that's used as a torture device. It's something that's used as um what can break down mental barriers. It's
Mhm.
something that drives the nervous system into a much more dysregulated state. So,
Yeah.
it's just like anything else. Most accidents happen when someone's sleep deprived, dehydrated, or hungry.
Hmm.
That's one of the three legs of sanity that sanity stands on,
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know?
Yeah, for sure. I want to make the focus about this, about your program, and I want to talk about how the unique struggles that the military population has versus uh, what came to my mind was in your video, Hold the Reins, you talk about the power of vulnerability
Mhm.
and how that can be weaponized against you, unfortunately, as men, especially, we know vulnerability is good, but you have to also be careful with who you're sharing that information with. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Before we jump into it, if you don't mind, just let me throw out a disclaimer that all my views, opinions, and comments are solely of my own. They're not supported by the Department of Defense, Department of Navy, or
Hmm.
Naval Special Warfare. So, allowing, telling someone that it's okay to be vulnerable with themselves is step one.
Hmm.
Um, to get away from the ego, to allow themselves to be honest with themselves, to be vulnerable with themselves, whether it's just journaling, self talk. With that vulnerability comes a lot of grace and acceptance. Um, and I think in the military, there's this conditioning that happens in boot camp. There's this conditioning that happens in all of our physical behaviors, our habits, our values are shaped or reshaped. Um, our behavior is influenced, certainly. So, vulnerability is not in the military community. It's not in men's life in general. More commonly in the military, we're just encouraged to focus on the mission, focus on the person next to you, whether that be um, I was about to say the team guy next to you, the shipmate, airman, the Marine, your battle buddy. I think that's what the Army uses, but there's very little that should get in our way when it comes to achieving mission success.
Right.
And there's not a lot of room for vulnerability in there because we're conditioned to be thinkers and performers in chaotic environments. That's what boot camp, special operations selection does. The higher you get into the special operations selection pipeline, the more and more dysregulated they want to make you. And the more challenges and tasks, kind of like the vagus nerve
Hmm.
study that you were just talking about. They're looking for people they can push beyond their limits that they're certain that their nervous system can handle. And
Hmm.
can they think? Can they control their emotions? Can they not focus on themselves? Can they worry about who's in their team or their boat crew? Encourage them, be a leader, and complete tasks. I mean, and just weeks of that, months of that, years of that drives the service member further and further away from themselves. Basically, there's a tier of concern. It's starting at the top for us in the SEAL teams. It's the team comes first, then your troop, then your team, your fire team, and then you're last. There's no real time for you. It's the military is different than I believe a lot of the civilian populace in that way, where we can't get away from that microcosm of society that has tried to reshape us and has in most times successfully reshaped us into a successful enlisted or officer in the military.
That's interesting. I mean, when it comes to how in the world would you begin to start to unwind that and recondition all that's been learned there?
Mm-hmm. Right. I walked into a therapist office and I said, Doc, I want to talk to you and I want to be able to harness all the good things I've got out of my military service, and I want to leave all the bad things. He laughed, sat back in his chair. He's like, yeah, Mike, sounds good. You guys are master compartmentalizers, and you have a warehouse full of boxes that you've shoved stuff in and just completely forgotten about, disregarded, and you have a warehouse full of boxes now. And I hear you say that you want to unpack some of those boxes and leave the bad stuff behind, but we're not going to stop with the last box that you packed. We're going to start with the first box you packed. And I was like, what did I just get myself into? And, you know, it was one of those journeys where it allowed me to look back at my childhood. It allowed me to look back at a lot of the things that shaped me, you know, in that theta brain state from my first memory to 7, 9, 13 years old, and really reason with myself and understand how my environment shaped me. Do I want to hold on to those things that I've carried for years? Do I want to start new habits? Do I want to become someone new that's truer to myself? So it was just an amazing journey that was scary. It still is scary. I still have this exploration, and you know, I'm so close to retirement and starting a new life that it's scary.
Yeah, you're damn right. It's scary. I mean, I've never been in the military or none of that, but like I can always relate that um there's a fine line. I used to feel that kindness, I've always been a kind person, like since I've
Mm-hmm.
been a young person, a very kind and compassionate person. But in my own journey, it kind of manifested in a strange way because um, you know, growing up the typical frat boy or going through college type stuff,
Sure.
kindness isn't really something that's valued as a man, especially in your 20s. And so what that
Sure.
manifested in is I became what I call a fake tough guy. You know,
Uh,
that was like the classic fake tough guy because no longer that was not valued. And so I made sure that people were going to see me or do whatever. I got into high risk behaviors and I really made an ass out of myself in a lot of different ways. But what I learned now is that like kindness is a superpower, but it doesn't
mhm.
have to be there's always a balance in life that like if I'm overly kind, people are gonna want to take advantage of that.
Mhm.
But you have to stay true to who you are. Um, and it's there's a reconditioning process there too that we all have to
Sure.
unwind our stuff. I want to know about like equine therapy, and how what is the idea behind that and how did that start for you all?
The idea behind it is that the horse is a living, breathing, interactive biofeedback mechanism.
Hmm.
It's wired for truth. It's wired for forgiveness. It's wired to mirror its environment. If there's a threat, it gets wound up. It gets tense. It gets tight. If you're sitting on the back of a horse and you're carrying a lot of tension in your body and you're heavy-handed or heavy-footed, the horse is going to be tight. The horse is not going to listen to you. And that, you know, fake, what'd you call it? Fake tough guy?
Fake tough guy, yeah.
The fake tough guy thing. In the teams, we call it being team guy And when we have a challenging thing, we say we can team guy our way through it. Like we can fake it till we make it. We can rely on our rough exterior, our talents, abilities, and our ability to bullshit to get through anything. None of that is effective around a horse.
Oh, no kidding.
You're raw. The horse exposes the human heart. The horse exposes the psyche. So a guy can come in and try to team guy his way through the introduction around the horse. And once he starts getting around the horse and we get him talking, and then we see the interaction between him and the horse, or see the horse react to the man, and then that allows us to shape a different conversation. So that's why the horse. This all came from like a lucid dream. I thought the horse was the answer to my community's problems when it comes to divorce and death by suicide and substance abuse, high risk behavior that you were just talking about is very common in our community and the military in general.
Yeah.
I really got serious about it around 2019, 2020. And I thought I was inventing equine therapy. I really didn't have a clue what I was trying to do. I just started looking up something ridiculous like how horses help humans and started thumbing through all this. Thank goodness we have modern medicine and we have all this data collection now, but empirical evidence in equine therapy is rudimentary compared to a lot of the studies that are out there and all the evidence that's evidence-based therapies. But horses have been used for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years for the human psyche and the human heart. There's proof of horses being used for this very thing in ancient Egypt. World War I and World War II, the United Kingdom used horses for shell shock service members. So when I started digging into it, it just made a lot of sense because the horse disarms everyone around him. And by the way that we use natural horsemanship, we don't try to dominate the horse. We don't teach guys to use tools to influence behavior outside of what the horse wants to do. In natural horsemanship, we have our participants build a relationship with the horse. And that's one beautiful thing about the horse too, is every person that interacts with the horse has its own natural way of having its own unique relationship with each person it comes in contact with. So you could come up to one of our go-to horses, Bailey, and he'll act a certain way, but he won't behave the same way when I'm working with Bailey. So it doesn't matter how many participants we have work with any individual horse. Every participant's going to have their own unique relationship with that horse. So I was lucky enough to find Rich Garner. He got introduced to me by way of a mutual friend. I was looking for a president of my nonprofit. And, I was just kind of making phone calls and hoping that people would be interested, people would support this idea. And Rich, he's a retired frogman. He's grew up cowboying. He's a horse trainer. He's got the horsemanship dialed in, and he knows our community. So when I approached him to ask him to be the president of Hold the Reins, I sent him my business plan. And the only thing he really had to say about the business plan, and we still laugh about this, is he said, "Mike, we will never, ever, ever, ever feed a horse from our hand." I was like, "Okay, Rich, but will you explain that to me?" He said, "They're not dogs. If you feed a dog, it's going to come back to you. It's going to want more reward. So dogs and horses are very different. But if you feed a horse, it's going to think it just took something from you. You just lost respect from that horse, because a horse can't give a gift. And when they want food, they take it from other horses in their herd." So that, without even walking on the ranch with Rich, I was like, this is going to be a good match. This is going to be a good thing, because the way that he understands the horse and the relationships that he wants to see people build with horses is built on mutual respect. It is built on that forgiveness. It's built on that grace. And that's what we allow guys to experience when they work around the horses. And a lot of the spouses, Or like, what did you do to my husband? I mean, we're not a therapy organization, really. We just help guys use tools that they've gotten from their therapists and engage those tools in conversations with us and with the actions with the horse. And some wives are like, take him, like get him back out to the farm as often as you can. And then the wives that come out to the farm with their husbands, they're like, I am seeing a side of my husband that I did not know existed. They're seeing their husbands behave, speak, and act in ways that they've never seen before. I mean, think about that. They were dating at one time. The husband was trying to do everything he could to court his then girlfriend, now wife.
Mm-hmm.
And he is now behaving in such a caring way that she's never seen it before. The vulnerability that you have to have around a horse disarmors you. Sorry, that was a long answer. Sorry, not sorry.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, things I never, even though I grew up on a farm, I never really considered those things. You know,
Yeah.
I never really considered the difference between a dog and a horse, and I, yeah, it's crazy to think that something like that, but there's something to it that's not scientific, and screw science, you know, because I love science, but it doesn't tell everything. You know, when you look at reality, the electromagnetic spectrum, for example,
I'm
you know,
glad you brought that up. Tell it.
like let's just say, like I go and I check out your profile on Instagram or something or YouTube. It's only showing a very, very sliver of what really exists out there and the
Mhm.
frequencies that are tuned into and the things that are unseen by our senses. So if you hit a dog whistle, the dog can hear that, but nobody else. It's because
Mhm.
he's able to tune into that. And
Mhm.
so I love science, but people get so narrow-minded that what's in front of them is the truth.
Right. There's electromagnetic studies that talk about the heart rate of a horse and the heart rate of a human when they're in proximity of each other. And the heart rates try to match each other, and a horse's heartbeat is much slower than ours. So when humans get around horses, the horse's lower heart rate tends to bring ours down, and our higher heart rate tends to bring the horse's heart rate up. And that electromagnetic bond is happening. You can't see it, just like you were talking about. You know, when we talk about, I'm sure I haven't seen any studies on this, but the heart rate variability, the HRV has to be changing as well, along with the heart rate. Again, no science. I don't have any science to back that up, but
Right.
when you see and you feel, I've seen guys show up at the farm and not smile, just really locked in, really tight, really serious. And I've seen a horse disarm a man in a matter of minutes. And I've seen them rub the hair off a horse, big old burly dudes that you just wouldn't think would be affectionate at, at face value. And we'll rub the hair off a horse, and simple conversation like, why are you petting that horse so much, do you think? And we'll hear some impressive things like, I don't want it to feel alone, or I don't want it to feel threatened. Huh? You know, and then that kind of opens doors to their heart, to their psyche. And it's like, well, what do you mean by that? Or where are you coming from when you say that? And all the while we're, as Rich would say, dinking around with the horse. The horse does all the work, man. I'm telling you. We just
That's
have the conversation. We just ask questions, and it's basically narrative therapy. We're not therapists again. I don't want anyone watching this interview and thinking that you're not doing narrative therapy. You're just a service member, plays with horses. I get it. But you just heard, Doc, you just said yourself, there's things that science can't explain, and you don't need science to explain all the things. So anyway.
Yeah, that's profound. I mean, there's something to be said, and uh, you know, I know that with comes to service members, there's a lot of TBI related
Sure.
incidents, and so I want to open the floor and talk about that in like what's been your personal experience and things that you've seen. I mean, we're talking PTA, we can talk about PTSD as well because that's a big one.
Yeah.
And what is your experience? Because I want to know more personally because I want to serve the military community more and more.
hmm
In that, what are some things that the average person just doesn't see about this?
When we talk about TBIs, our TBIs in the special operations community are not like what the studies will show in the NFL or
Yeah.
other impact activities. Most of our TBIs come from blast or shock events. Um, so honestly, studies are they're still trying to figure out. There's a few organizations up in Massachusetts and at Walter Reed. They're trying to understand how those blast waves and that shock affects the brain, because those shock waves and blast waves echo throughout the entire brain. They don't just affect the prefrontal cortex, as in a football player ramming his head
Right.
into something, or
Right.
a hockey player colliding heads or hitting the ice, or a
Right.
soccer player. I couldn't believe soccer players, I think, lead any professional sports organization for head injuries.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep.
They're using their head.
hmm
I mean, whether it's
The repetition
practice
of it.
or games, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, our understanding of TBI and how it relates to our community is the jury's still out. I went to the Navy SEAL Impact Forum up in Washington, D.C. to listen to these doctors talk about TBIs and what they're trying to research, how they're trying to treat, and how they're trying to understand the differences in our brain tissue compared to professional athletes' brain tissue post-mortem. They, there's scarring, there's lesions, there's cellular growth that is uncommon in other high level activity professionals. Um, so my understanding of it, I think, is as good as it can be without the science talk. And I know enough to say that the jury's still out. We're hoping to have some conclusive evidence and some clear paths into how to treat TBI in our community, but we're just not there yet. We
Yeah.
do have a lot of guys that show up to the farm with some degradation in their mental faculties, whether it's memory loss,
hmm
inability to learn new skills and tasks and retain those every time that they come out to the farm, um, fluctuations in mood. But, Rich and I have been in this community for a combined 35 years, 36 years. So we know the community and we know how to deal with these guys. We know the ego, you know, we don't just deal with SEALs. We also welcome the special warfare combatant crewmen and explosive ordnance disposal technicians. So it's all of Naval Special Warfare who's welcome out to the farm. And,
Yeah.
everybody has their own unique cultural differences. Like we were talking about earlier, how the military differs from the civilians. And within every subcomponent of the military, if an Army guy sits next to a Navy guy, there's going to be beef. They're going to make fun of each other. There's not going to be that instant bond.
Yeah.
Sit an Army guy next to an Army guy, and it's like, hey, what unit were you at? What's your MOS? How long were you in? Were you stationed? All these things. Like, oh, did we just become best friends? Sure did. That sort of thing happens. So there's all these other subcomponents within the military that they all have their own unique things that make them who they are. Um, I
Like,
felt like you had a two-part question and I lost the second part. Surprise,
oh,
surprise.
something really struck me is I want to know like your thoughts on the power of identity in all of this because in my personal journey,
Uh,
identity was everything because I used to look at myself in the mirror. I call myself a loser. I would call
uh,
myself, like I would call myself, I thought I was the scum of the earth. I blew up to 195 pounds and was addicted to drugs. But when I understood that identity really mattered, uh, a lot changed for me. Like, you know, I just want to know from your perspective as somebody who's been through a lot, like what is that? What comes up to you about that?
Um, a lot of things really. And I've done a lot of work with Hugh Vale out at Mustang Medicine. He's a great mentor of mine and Rich's. And he was one of my best friends, hands down, today. Um, Hugh and I, we ride horses and we talk. Some of the most profound conversations happen on horseback. We have an executive director for mental health. Ramsey Goshard is his name. And he said, men think in triangles. One classic example was two men go into a restaurant that has a bar. Where do they sit? They're not sitting in the booth. They're sitting at the bar because there's a barmaid, there's TVs, there's other people, and they don't have to face each other. As long as we don't have to have deep conversation face to face, we can play golf and have a great conversation, better conversation than sitting across from each other at a table. And it's the same thing sitting on horseback. That triangular thought process that men have just creates profound conversation. So Hugh and I are talking one day. He's like, Mike, why do you think you joined special operations? I said, well, funny story. A chaplain called us out before Hell Week and said, gents, if any one of you have been told that this is not a holy war, this is 2005. No, 2007. I joined the Navy in 2005, went to Buds 2007. He said, if anyone's told you this is not a holy war, I have something else to say about it. Right then and there, I knew why I was in the military, why I joined. I grew up Catholic. I'm a Christian. And for that moment in time, it was revealed to me that I joined the Navy to be a warrior for Christ. I'm telling this story to Hugh. He's like, very interesting, Michael. Well, you told me about how you grew up and your background and, your big family. I grew up in Ohio, and then at a younger age, we moved to Georgia. So I lost my big family. My parents were on the grind, creating new careers for themselves. I was kind of alone. I made a lot of bad decisions from 18 to 23, 22 years old, trying to fill that gap, trying to fill that loss of belonging. So he was recapping my life. He's like, so it seems to me that you quite possibly joined the military because of the brotherhood. Now you have this big family back. Now you have my stepdad came from a family of 9. My mom came from a family of 11. I had tens and tens and tens of cousins, and he couldn't go anywhere in town without running into a cousin. And that's what the military kind of gave me. We call it mother military. A lot of military veterans try to latch on to the military and don't feel like they can carry on with life, reinvent themselves, become a productive member of society because they looked at the military like mother military as their mom. I guess I did that too. I saw the military as my mom. That's mother military. All the Navy SEALs around me, or the candidates and buds, or the shipmates that I had when I was in the fleet on the Nimitz, those are my brothers and sisters. So there's a lot of ways to look at it. But when we boil it down, when we talk about identity, and I'm vulnerable with myself, that very well, I have no rebuttal to that theory that Hugh brought up. I'm like, yes, that makes perfect sense. And I have been fulfilled in my loss of family ever since I joined the military. So the identity thing, Sean Ryan was asked by Jordan Peterson, why did you become a Navy SEAL? And Sean Ryan had a moment of vulnerability. He said, I wanted to prove something to my dad. What, dude? Like, You put yourself through all of that training, all of those deployments. You broke your body, you broke your mind. You did all these things to prove something to somebody else, not yourself.
Yeah.
What? Like, when it comes to identity and people get real with themselves, I talked to an admiral who did 30 years about hold the reins. And, you know, a big part of our mission is to get guys to get to know, help guys open up to themselves early in their careers so they don't get to the end of their career and there goes the military, there goes the teams, there goes the high risk training, there goes all the things, mother military, the family, the brotherhood, all of that departs, and the service member, the retiree, and the veteran, or whoever he is sitting there wondering, who am I? That's a big part of our mission. So I was telling this 30-year admiral about the program, and he just sat back in his chair and he's like, oh my gosh. He said, when I retired, I almost detonated my life. I almost divorced my wife of 29 years. I almost pushed all the chips in and said, F it. And if that can happen to him, a very successful admiral, high-ranking officer in the Navy, it can happen to anybody, and it does. It happens to everybody. I don't want to throw out a blanket statement as everybody, but it happens to everybody for sure to some extent. It's just not catastrophic for everybody.
Man, yeah, that's just nuts. Like, thought something that really comes to my mind is the amount of stress, the stress threshold, essentially, that you guys, especially high-ranking military SEAL, the amount of the stress threshold is just off the charts. I guess it's like a rubber band almost, that if you pull back a rubber band, eventually we're all humans and we all have our breaking point. But
Right.
like how I guess let's just have a little short conversation about stress. Like,
Sure.
like what can be done about regulating that essentially.
What we're finding, Rich, my president, Rich Garner, Hugh Vale, and his business partner, Jeff Kirkham, we've kind of fallen off the wagon a little bit, but we used to have a roundtable conversation every Wednesday, and we would talk about topics like this. And what we've surmised is that how we talked about in boot camp and buds and SQT, those are the things that I know and I can speak about, but think about special operations training in general. They drive us as far into the dysregulated nervous system. They stress us out. They sleep deprive us. They force us to eat enough sustainable calories in a very short amount of time. There is no taking the foot off the gas for weeks and months and months and months. And then we get into our unit or our command or our team, and you kind of hit another gear. You just keep your feet on the gas, and the risk in training comes up. The idea of going on deployment and facing serious life or death consequences enters the picture. And the body doesn't know if you're just training or you're fighting for real. The body knows you're having other people point guns at it. There's skydiving at night. I don't care how many times you do it. The body's going to release biochemicals that says, hey, this is not natural for me. What are we doing? We become addicted to adrenaline. We become addicted to dopamine. We make the dysregulated nervous system, we make that dysregulated state our new home. And when guys try to step out of that dysregulated state, they get real itchy. Why does there's like this classic scene in Talladega Nights near the end where they're all sitting at Applebee's and Ricky Bobby's dad is getting itchy. He's like, oh, everybody's enjoying themselves. We should do this every week. This is beautiful. And then Ricky Bobby's dad is like, you know what? Whatever he says, like, there's extra onions on my steak. And I specifically asked you not to put onions. Like, that is the classic example of being comfortable in chaos. And you don't the normal person, they see chaos, they're like, nope, not doing anything with that. I'm out. I want to be comfortable. I want to be happy. I want to be full. I want to be drunk, whatever it is.
Yeah.
People in our community were like, we gravitate towards that chaos. We gravitate towards that high risk behavior. We gravitate towards that adrenaline. That becomes our home. That's our new home.
Mm-hmm.
And if you try to take us out of it, if you try to get us to down regulate, you try to get us to be happy and be comfortable
Yeah.
and be at peace, it's like, it's not right. One of the big things I thought to myself, I don't deserve it. What have I done to deserve peace? What have I done to deserve happiness? I'm getting choked up thinking about it.
Dude.
And we get guys out at the farm, they're like, one guy, he was like, I have not felt this at peace in years. We had another guy jump back into church. He's like, I haven't been to church in 3 years. I'm back in church. We share scripture every day, me and this guy. And he drags people to church with him. And, that's Christ at work. Because me and Rich and the horse, we can't help guys. We have a continuum of care, obviously, but we can't make guys do anything. And that's Christ. That's Jesus's teachings. That's the Bible. That's scripture. That's something beyond science, like you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
For someone to follow through, I'm sure I'd like to hear your story. And, we were talking about your tie to Tucson and how you've been able to stay the course. For me, it's been Christ that's been leading me.
Yep.
How has it been for you?
For me, when you talked about the adrenaline, the addiction to adrenaline. So if you get addicted enough from adrenaline, you have adrenal fatigue, And even to this day, there's a little bit in that me. It's just I've always had an addictive nature and always manifested in different ways. Right now, it's manifesting in good things, but I'm still aware that that's my addictive tendencies behind that. So to take you back, the reason I got into what I do today is 11 years ago, I was standing outside of a nightclub in my hometown, Asheville, North Carolina, and I ended up getting in a fight with a big ass bouncer who was about three times my size. He knocked me out. It was liquid courage, right? That's why they call it liquid courage. And
Sure.
so there it was, and it went viral on the news channel. Everybody in Asheville saw it. It was virality before virality was a thing. And so it's still on YouTube to this day. People have to refer people so they honestly know where the heck I came from. And
Sure.
so after that incident, I ended up having grand mal seizures, and I continuously had them in Tucson, Arizona was where I ended up going to. This is kind of getting freaky a little bit because that was where I had my first grand mal seizure was in a drug rehabilitation program in Tucson, Arizona. And they took me to the hospital. They discovered what basically is a benign brain tumor that was leaking blood into the rest of the brain. Uh, Long story short, I went to have surgery in Phoenix. They removed that, but I was still continuously going downhill. The medicines didn't stop anything. I continued to have grand mal seizures and concussions because of that. Uh, and I was just dysregulated and I was lost. And um, I was on Keppra. This is why I don't advocate for most of the people that is to be careful with medications because I took this seizure medication named Keppra, and all of a sudden, the nice guy in me, I became like the devil, kind of. It made me very angry, and they took me to a mental institution for a little bit, and just making bad decisions, impulsivity, you name it after that. I got back into drugs after it all. And then, long story short, I discovered God, and I discovered the power, healing power of God when I started to get into meditation
Mm,
and spirituality. And I felt that presence. And when you feel that present moment, that everything is eternal in the present moment, that the past doesn't exist, the future, none of that, just that. And it was just like a sense of knowingness and
right.
peace. So you're right. It does tapping into something greater than you. Uh, you know, there science can't explain that, like as
Mhm.
much as they'll ever want to try. And so that's my long story short. And then got into what I'm doing today, helping people with brain injuries. So, and ironically, talking to a guy where I had my first seizure. So that's wild.
You, when we got on the call before we started recording, you were like, within 10 seconds, bro, it looks like you're in Tucson. That was great. I was like, well, my guy's
That
from
was a
Tucson.
wild
You're like, no,
guess,
I ain't
but
from Tucson. I just,
my intuition knew it somehow.
I did.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's so good. The,
Yeah. That's what I do, and dude, and all I want to do at the end of the day, I found my mission, my life mission, and that's
yeah,
beautiful at such a young age. But all I want people to understand is they can become their own doctor. That damn simple.
sure,
Like you
sure.
doctor, if you look up the word in Latin, it means to teach.
Oh,
That's it.
I didn't know that.
Doctor means to teach, docere. That's the translation right there.
Huh,
And we've gone so far away from that. That's it.
yeah. So, how do you empower people?
I just explained to them what the human body is possible, what the capability really is. One of the ways I empower people is I tell them about the piano study. So,
Tell me. I don't know it.
so they had two groups. They had one group that only that played a five finger tone, five keys for 5 days for 2 hours at a time. Group A. Then they had Group B that only imagined doing the same five finger tone.
Uh-huh.
Same thing, 5 days for 2 hours at a time, just imagining doing that. And they
Mm,
took them, they were doing brain scans on these people. The same thing. And what they found is the neurological changes were identical.
yeah,
Like
like the
nearly,
neural pathways that were being built.
yep, nearly
Yeah.
identical. And like that's what I tell is like if you're thinking about it, your mind thinks that that's the reality essentially. So what are you focusing on right now, you know?
Huh. I never thought about applying in special operations. Mental rehearsals, mental drills are a big part of my bag anyway. That's something I've got from our sports psychs and all those others that help us stay at uh, stay at our prime. But I never thought about using those tools to get to be a better person, to get things that I want in life. That's sick.
Those are the things like, the God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, like God, Christ, these are what they give us. This is
Mm,
they tell us that it's all within inside of us. The answers are from within, they're not from the outside.
mm.
So
So does one have to be, in your opinion, does one have to unpack the first box in the warehouse to make changes, or can someone start where they are in the present moment and go from there?
I truly believe start right now on a second to moment basis. Like if you
Yeah.
decide because I see a lot of things in the brain injury space, I see how wild some of this, how far the rabbit hole goes down. In my case, okay, I had a bad TBI, I was having seizures, but I wasn't a vegetable like some of the guys I met.
Uh-huh.
Their doctors told their families that they uh, were either going to be a vegetable or they were going to take them off of life support. Several guys now. And so in my new book, I'm bringing some of these guys in because their stories are even more magnificent than mine about the healing power of the mind. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so like some of these guys, you would think it's just wild what you'll see in uh just if I'm empowering people, I feel it has to be the education is a part of it. Like so if they
Uh-huh.
have the foundation of education and they have the same empowering understandings, if you know this is the truth right here is if you know what if you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, then doesn't the how become easy? I don't know how that works in your life as a SEAL, but
In
you
business,
get
it's worked
things
like that.
accomplished. Yeah, business too. Yeah.
I knew my why. I just figured the rest out, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And, it's just that determination, really, for someone to reason with themselves. What do you want? All right, don't let nothing stop you. Fail better next time. But to go back to the TBI groups that you've been helping and individuals that you've been helping, my cousin, Brianna Maglio, your listeners, and you can look her up. She got in this horrendous car accident in New York. The Uber driver and all other passengers died in the wreck. And Bree lost the majority of her teeth. She lived. She sustained a major TBI. Doctors didn't think she was going to make it. Again, like you were saying, thought she was going to be a vegetable. Had no chance, little to no chance of survival, let alone never going to be herself again. She is walking again. She's taking boxing lessons. She's the most positive person. That she recently got involved with a nonprofit that focuses on the Rangers, Army Rangers, kind of like we specialize in Naval Special Warfare because that's the groups we know. She found a nonprofit in Long Island, not far from her house, that specializes in taking care of Army Rangers, and she's inspiring them. They're like, yeah, we got a couple TBIs, and Bree's missing 3/4 of her vision, has a dead leg, has to go to physical therapy twice a day, and she's the most positive, bubbly, let's do this, nothing can stop us kind of attitude. And these dudes who are big bad rangers are just like, what are you made of? Like, you are incredible.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I text her and her mom, my aunt. I'm like, Bree is the most inspiring person I've ever met in my life. To think about the things. I mean, she lost her longtime boyfriend. I mean, they're due to be engaged and due to be married, and all the families involved. It was tragic, and Bree's life will never be the same. I don't know that she'll ever be able to live by herself and provide for herself. Knowing that I just said that, she's going to prove me wrong. If she ever sees this, I'll probably tell her about this podcast and be like, hey, I was
Yeah.
talking trash about you. And she's going to like,
Say what you just say?
oh, dude, she's a rough kid, like tough kid.
Yeah.
Um, but the most positive, most beautiful spirit I've ever met. She's so tough. And she's had the most devastating TBI. Another aunt, I went to the National Intrepid Center of Excellence up in Walter Reed, and they did brain scans, talked about TBIs. And,
Yeah.
she was in the medical field. She was a nurse for the longest time. I was like, hey, Aunt Jean, why don't you take a look at my papers, see what you think? And she throws my papers at me. She's like, TBI? The doctor said you have TBI? Your cousin Bree is a TBI. You are not. You don't have TBIs. I was like, okay, you got it. I got it. You're right. Like, I really don't have a leg to stand on in this argument right now. But anyway,
Like pucker up buttercake, type of
Seriously. Yeah.
cool, man. Well, I want to kind of end this conversation in the idea of like what is courage for you, and then we'll just end on some things some takeaways that you could give to anybody that's listening that's struggling out there because like there's some shit going on, like if we're
Yeah.
being honest with ourselves, like about society and the way things are changing so quickly. Elon, pulling out robots and like, I personally don't mind if they want to do my dishes and like they
Yeah.
want to do my laundry. But like, I don't know, like let's just have some thoughts about courage and how can people get out of a rut?
Yeah. Being honest with oneself. And it is so challenging
Mm,
now that I know about core wounded beliefs and protective behavior. There's behaviors that we perform every day that protect us, and that's the wounded child. That's the ingrained, learned behavior that we've either taught ourselves or our environment has taught us in that theta brain.
mhm.
And then there's pattern behaviors of connection. That's the opposite spectrum of pattern behaviors of protection. And in our ability to connect, we have to connect with ourselves first. And it's tough to do. Think about the guys. I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but the guys who want to get big muscles, who want to bulk up and take steroids and just
Right.
create this, present themselves to the world that makes them feel safer. I mean, they're not trying to present themselves to the world to affect any change necessarily. I think guys who bulk up and do all these steroids and become gym rats, it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel protected, like they can protect themselves.
Yep.
But if you talk to that dude, I mean, worst case scenario, he's a dick.
Mm-hmm.
Or he believes in his program to put on muscle and just like encourage other people to be muscular. When all reality, it's like, why? Can we just stop for a second and say, why? Why do you need all these muscles? If someone can ask themselves why am I behaving like this? When I started working through my stuff and, working through some of the issues that I had growing up, it was easier for me to find those answers of why. And I think it starts with where you encourage people to start. Sitting still.
Mm-hmm.
Slow down. I was having a conversation with my stepmom's dad last night, and he said, kids these days need to find careers where AI and robots can't take their jobs. And I said, well, that's a beautiful thing. I think everybody belongs out in nature anyway. We all need to be around animals. There's no AI. There's no robots that can do the things that happen on a farm. I mean, of course, milking cows. I know some rednecks out there were just like, nope, I got one. Got it.
Got it. I busted that myth down for a
But
second.
being out in nature,
Yeah.
like that meditation and being out in nature. Moses spoke to God in nature. Jesus went on his 40-day trek, had to be in nature to reason with his divinity. And just like you're talking about, God is inside you.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage people to get out in nature, slow down, take your advice, meditate, take my advice. Ask yourself some easy questions that might have some hard answers, and just be honest with yourself. Once we start becoming honest with ourselves, we can start to understand ourselves, and we can change behaviors. You know, the struggle's real for all of us. I mean, me and you sit here and we're talking to each other like we all both got it figured out, but I can guarantee we're both struggling
You damn
to
right.
keep it right, to right the ship,
You damn right.
and just keep it pointed in the right direction, brother. Like some days I feel like I'm barely hanging on, and
You damn right.
I've got my pocket rosary and I really pray. Heck, I pray to family members who have passed, just be around me. Please give me strength. I mean, it is not easy for anybody, but you got to get back on the horse. There's no way around, it's just like, oh, this is inappropriate, but I got to send it. Procrastination is like masturbation. It feels good while you're doing it, but in the end, you're just screwing yourself. Like you cannot avoid yourself, or you're just screwing yourself. You can't go around issues.
Yeah.
It's tough. Like your advice is the way. Having dudes out at the farm, making them sit still with the horse is in itself a way of slowing down and being in nature. They might not be the best. They're not ready to have the silence and the stillness of meditation. But those who are ready for it, those who need it, should take your advice and just slow down. Find that breath rate. Don't control the mind. Let the mind do what it needs to do.
Well said. Well said. And
Oh yeah.
you said hold the reins, so
Hold the reins.
I think that's a great place to end this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on this podcast, and what's some ways that people can hit you up?
Yeah, visit us at www.holdthereins.org. My email address is m as in Mike, Paul @holdthereins.org. We're on social media. I mean, heck, I'm just short of giving my cell phone number. I enjoyed myself so much, but I can't do that.
Yeah, fair enough. You never know out there.
I know. Yeah. You got it going on. Like your viewership is probably pretty strong, and probably not the most savory characters are watching it. So
it could always a possibility, Mike. Appreciate you coming on.
yeah, thank you so much. It's
All
been
right.
an honor.